Hi, you're with Scott Stewart and Peter Carr on LonghausTV, the research channel. Peter, this week you're at Cisco Live in Melbourne. How did that go?
Yeah, it was great. And look, let me just say, first of all, welcome to the research channel, Scott.
Thank you.
It should be a fun year, I'm sure. Look, Cisco Live is a big event. It's actually the first time that they have held the Cisco Live conference in Australia. A lot of people out there would recognise the major Cisco conference as being Cisco networkers.
Right.
That's been their traditional bread and butter. You know, very much a religious conference experience for all the networking people out there. But this year they tried to expand the content of the footprint to be in line, I guess, with their approach to come up the value chain inside organisations. So being a traditional switching and routing tech vendor
Yes.
in the network space, you know, a lot of the deals done with Cisco have traditionally been on a consignment or a purchase order for, you know, send me 6 of those and 5 of those, and so they've been working over the last couple of years to really come up that value chain and start to offer solutions. So it was a real interest to see, you know, to see what they had on offer this year. So one of the real highlights at the conference this year was the appearance of Padmasree Warrior, who's the Cisco CTO. So 1.5 million followers on Twitter.
Wow.
One of the most senior women in technology on the planet, and she came along to share the vision as well. So, but I said, you know, from our perspective, from a Longhouse perspective, there were probably 6 main questions we wanted to get answered, and then so I'll just run through those, and then maybe we can cover them off in a little bit to and fro. So obviously, Cisco and the VCE alliance with VMware and EMC. So I wanted to know how that was going. Questions about Cisco's platform rationalization strategy, where they were taking network virtualization,
Right.
what they were doing with video conferencing following the Tandberg acquisition last year, their movement into compute with UCS, and then there was a question about their unified fabric, I think, you know, in competition to some of that stuff that you covered off at Juniper.
Yes, okay. So how about we run through those?
Yeah.
VCE?
VCE. So VCE is interesting because it's really it's a marriage of a couple of top vendors, right? And you always you know, begin to wonder how these things are really working behind the scenes. Obviously, VCE is having quite a bit of success. There's been some press releases out lately with some industry wins. The main product that gets bought or shipped or installed as a service offering inside the end user client is something called vBlock, and vBlock has the switching and routing from Cisco. It has the storage from EMC, and it has that virtualization layer from VMware that allows that separation of services from the underlying core. So most notably, KPMG has been one of the big clients. So the big 4 moving to this kind of private cloud environment. That would obviously be interesting from your background. Yes. The thing about a marriage like that is that there's always, you know, there always tends to be a dominant player in those sorts of arrangements. I got the sense that you know, the focus is very much on delivering value for the customer, but whether there's a lot of longevity in that, you know, 3-party model, you know, is probably yet to be seen, I would say. And you know, we start to see things like Cisco working more closely with NetApp from a storage perspective, you know, because at the end of the day, I think that there's a number of clients out there who don't necessarily like an alliance thrust upon them, or they may not have existing systems that come from one of those 3 vendors.
So if a customer does adopt the vBlock, do you think that there's a risk there with being backed by an alliance?
Probably not so much that there's an alliance behind there, because you know, they're very, very strong players. I mean, VMware certainly right up the top of the ladder in terms of virtualization technology as it applies to private cloud. In actual fact, I think they came in second, though, behind Microsoft in terms of our recent study in that particular space. EMC, strong in storage, but you know, the VMware part of their business has been holding them up. So there are other players in that storage market, and certainly, you know, Cisco from a networking perspective continues to be very strong. So it's really a case of what the longer term vision is, I think, and why what services an end user organisation would be looking to deploy over the top of essentially what is a private cloud in a rack that gets wheeled in. Where do you go from there? Do you do more private cloud? Do you start to look to the trusted cloud environment? And so these are some of the questions that probably peaked in my mind. Why will we see such a big uptake of vBlock
Yes.
when there's this question of should we own our own infrastructure or should we just be renting it from somebody else.
So you think mainly at this stage it's for data center operators that they're mainly focusing on?
Certainly a big market, and if we look at, again, back to our study, there is certainly a lot of colo delivery of that trusted infrastructure in the cloud market, and so the vBlock provides a great walk-up start for someone to kind of wheel this in and just have it coloed in someone else's data center.
Okay.
But a good offering. It looks sexy in the rack, and I'm sure they'll sell a number of them.
So what did you hear about platform rationalization?
So platform rationalization, that's an interesting one. It's something Cisco don't like to talk about too much, and it's, they're whenever we've asked them about platform rationalization, so the question is really looking at the infrastructure and hardware behind the scenes. Cisco has a number of operating systems that underpin different hardware devices within their product portfolio, and so a client can feasibly have 3 different operating systems, even though they've got all Cisco kit inside their environment. So there's this, when you compare it to something like Juniper, which has Junos and Junos Space with a single operating system environment, then there's obviously the manageability of those things start to come into it. The other interesting thing is as Cisco starts to release new products onto the market, and we're starting to see some move into the certainly with the video and communication and collaboration side of the telephony part. Obviously, the Android operating system is going to come into play as well on top of those traditional operating system uses. So I actually put the question to Padma when we had a round table in terms of what was their platform rationalization strategy, and her response was that is a consistent message or question that she asked of her own team. Now, to put that in perspective, her team is 10,000 Cisco engineers, but they don't seem to have an answer for that at the moment. Their response is quite, to date, to us anyway, has been quite flippant in terms of whether or not they think they need to address it. But certainly in that core switching and routing market, in that whole flattening of the data center discussion, then you would tend to think that a single operating system would be a better operating model. Yeah,
certainly. I think that whole platform approach, right, with exposed APIs and all that kind of thing, is going to be pretty critical.
Yeah, exactly. And again, thinking about the private cloud or the trusted cloud model, how many operating systems do you want within the back end of your cloud operating environment?
Exactly. Virtualized networks.
Virtualized networks. So the virtualized networks was something they really covered. We didn't get to go to the deep dive in any of the big networking sessions. We very much had the discussions with the executives. I have to say that the Cisco senior executive team in Australia is first class. They really are fantastic. The network virtualization thing is a big one for end user organisations to consider. You would understand in large organisations lots of legacy environments that run on multiple networks. You would have a voice network and a data network or maybe 4 types of data networks and all these other things. And so what we heard was some fantastic case studies about a number of clients rationalising onto a single virtualised network, which allowed a separation of the services within a single channel, if you like. And so the really interesting example was one given by Melbourne Airport, and they were able to rationalise all their networks down to a single network, and what it provided them was almost like an SOA approach, service-oriented architecture approach to deploying new customers within their network. So their customers weren't just CASA and the airlines, it was also the retail shops and inside and the Qantas clubs and all these sorts of things. So if you think about when a new retail partner comes into something like the Melbourne Airport, then the need for them to be provisioned with either direct telephony, internet, point of sale systems, all these sorts of things. And so that single virtualized network, I think that being able to add and take away customers from a service catalogue perspective really simplifies a lot of that complexity that has existed.
Well, that's a space to keep our eye on then.
Absolutely, yeah.
Peter, I did an earlier episode with Sam on Juniper's Q Fabric, and it was quite interesting that they've developed this fabric to flatten out the data center, increase the performance of the data center, and move the intelligence from a core switch to the edge, so that they were able to only read a packet once. And there was some vast improvements in performance. in latency and jitter and all those kind of things. So obviously, I'm sure Cisco, been watching that closely. Well, how do you think they would answer that?
Yeah. So look, the Cisco's, I wouldn't say their answer to, because they would probably say our offering in that space, and they actually have been in the market for a while with the fabric offering. It's called Unified Fabric. Yeah. Their position on that is that they obviously have a very strong offering. They actually give some numbers, probably not so much numbers about performance, although they do talk about a 25% reduction in power and increased performance and things like that. I think the interesting thing is really a question of adoption of and also what types of technologies we're talking about to enable the fabric. And so for them, I did actually ask the question, because in Padma's keynote, she said we have, and she made some reference to the competition, and she did say that Cisco have 10,000 unified fabric customers, which is a pretty impressive number.
That's right, yeah.
And so I did get to ask at a later stage how Cisco actually count a unified fabric customer, and that there was. I got a couple of different answers.
Yeah.
One of them was that perhaps it is the number of Nexus 7000, maybe Nexus 5000, which is their core switching technology.
Yes.
How many of those boxes they actually sell? But as you're aware, a fabric offering includes a number of different products, and so I think the question of how many true fabric customers are out there, I think 10,000 might be overstated.
Yeah.
I think shipping core switching units, as powerful as they are and as fantastic as they are, is probably not a great measure at this stage. Okay. But having said that, they've obviously shipped a lot. Yeah. Adoption is not a problem for Cisco, and so maybe we will see more unified fabric than QFabric out there in the market.
Yeah, I guess adoption is probably the challenge for Juniper, being, I guess, so much smaller than Cisco. But I think the interesting thing with Juniper is that they basically said that, Ethernet, the performance of Ethernet is, and particularly with the pressures around cloud, and is coming to end of life, and they wiped the slate clean and came out with a completely new fabric, and they call it fabric, but clearly it is a paradigm shift, to use their words, I guess. But it clearly is something different.
Yeah, and look, I think that goes somewhat back to the conversation about the virtualized network as well, right? That is a very powerful offering with great cost rationalization benefits to organisations. Infinitely scalable, service improvements in terms of, technology delivered service catalog. So the whole fabric debate is one we're all watching closely. I think it does, tend to get mixed up and confused a lot with the, with the cloud conversation. But it can also be difficult from an executive level as well. If you go in and you're talking about fabric, and then you're talking about network virtualization, and then you're talking about unified compute, and then you're talking about VC alliances and vBlock products within a. There's 5 things there. You ask any non-technical business executive to give you an explanation of what all those things mean. You're going to get a very confusing response, and and maybe close down the opportunity. So there's certainly some segmentation and better messaging, I think, around those that can be done. So I guess the other question, video conferencing, with the acquisition of Tandberg. So Cisco has been big in the press and the message that video is the new voice.
Yes.
And so the developments in the network and in the data center over the last couple of years have been really fantastic. And so Cisco's play now is really about high definition video. So they won't be shipping any new equipment that doesn't have HD capability in terms of the video conferencing. So video is the play for Cisco. So when we start to look at solutions like UCS, which is Cisco's move into the server space, a couple of years ago, or not even that, they came in, and so all these organisations who used to go to IBM for their servers, or to HP for their servers, or these organisations that have traditionally operated in that space, they were suddenly faced with this decision about whether or not they should go to Cisco for compute, who were only known for their for their networking capability. But what we found is that they're winning market share. They're having some great success with that UCS platform. But what it is strategically is really the opportunity for them to sell more services at that video layer, which they see as very important. So it brings me to my final point on Cisco, is their strategic move into collaboration. I have some, not concerns, but I don't necessarily agree that their statements about moving into collaboration, one, necessarily align with the market's expectations of collaboration, and two, whether the whole strategy is kind of thought out at the moment. But if we think about collaboration, well, let me ask you, who are a couple of the main companies you would think about if I mention collaboration? Microsoft, yeah. Lotus,
yeah.
These sorts of organisations.
Yeah.
So collaboration has traditionally been based on a messaging and identity platform, right? And so what Cisco is really trying to do is to define a new type of collaboration, and it's an IP-based collaboration on an IP-tel backbone, where video is the new voice of the community, if you like. And so Cisco's collaboration play is about video-led communication, but bringing in things like content and search and all these sorts of things, instant messaging, presence awareness, and look, they've got some really great thoughts about how identity management and presence awareness and network context will play together in terms of enabling collaboration. But I think we're a year or two away from them actually realising some real traction in the market. I think I'm not convinced they're going to steal traditional collaboration market share from the big vendors, but it's certainly a piece of the market to watch, and I think it's certainly an area of debate. So I guess to finish up, I would say that it was a very positive event. The Cisco team was really first rate. Size-wise, they're now doing about $1.2 billion in Australia and New Zealand alone, which is about the global size of a Juniper. And they're making significant plays and advances in that services level above their traditional businesses. So, and Cisco is a company to watch for all new reasons these days. One of the most senior women in technology on the planet, and she came along to share the vision as well. So, but I said, from our perspective, from a Longhouse perspective, there were probably 6 main questions we wanted to get answered, and then, so I'll just run through those, and then maybe we can cover them off a little bit to and fro. So obviously, Cisco and the VCE alliance with VMware and EMC. So I wanted to know how that was going. Questions about Cisco's platform rationalisation strategy, where they were taking network virtualisation. What they were doing with video conferencing following the Tandberg acquisition last year, their movement into compute with UCS, and then there was a question about their unified fabric, I think, in competition to some of that stuff that you covered off at Juniper.
Yes, okay. So how about we run through those?
Yeah.
VCE?
VCE. So VCE is interesting because it's really, it's a marriage of a couple of top vendors, right? And you always, begin to wonder how these things are really working behind the scenes. Obviously, VCE is held. It should be a fun year, I'm sure. Look, Cisco Live is a big event. It's actually the first time that they have held the Cisco Live conference in Australia. A lot of people out there would recognise the major Cisco conference as being Cisco networkers. That's been their traditional bread and butter. Very much a religious conference experience for all the networking people out there. But this year they tried to expand the content of the footprint to be in line, I guess, with their approach to come up the value chain inside organisations. So being a traditional switching and routing tech vendor
Yes.
in the network space. You know, a lot of the deals done with Cisco have traditionally been on a consignment or a purchase order for, you know, send me 6 of those and 5 of those, and so they've been working over the last couple of years to really come up that value chain and start to offer solutions. So it was a real interest to see, you know, to see what they had on offer this year. So one of the real highlights at the conference this year was the appearance of Pat Masbury-Warrior, who's the Cisco CTO. So 1.5 million followers on Twitter.
Wow. Hi, you're with Scott Stewart and Peter Carr on LonghausTV, the research channel. Peter, this week you're at Cisco Live in Melbourne. How did that go?
Yeah, it was great. And look, let me just say, first of all, welcome to the research channel.